in the money at the time, it was a $30,000 ring, 157 carats that he gave him, a sapphire ring. Sammy Davis Jr. He used to go to listen to a lot of his shows. Elvis used to listen to a lot of shows of the Rat Pack in Vegas at the time. You know, they returned the favor, vice versa. But when we were talking about Bill Medley and the Righteous Brothers, and ironically Sammy Davis Jr., the Righteous Brothers and Sammy Davis Jr. were originally offered the song "In the Ghetto," which was originally called "The Vicious Circle," which Jesse mentioned yesterday, which is the truth. It was called "The Vicious Circle" originally, but it's called "In the Ghetto," and it was written by Scott Mac Davis. You know him as Mac Davis. His name was Scott. He wrote the song, and it was a little bit edgy at the time. So, you know, Sammy sort of turned it down. He really didn't want to do it at that time. Yeah, okay, he did it later, of course. But Bill Medley just flat out didn't want to do it at all. He just thought it was too edgy for what they wanted, you know, because Bill Medley, that wasn't kind of what they were all about at the time. And really Elvis wasn't either, but Elvis was trying to get some good songs and do stuff that would get, you know, out there and get him noticed, so to speak. And also, you know, you were saying, was Bill Medley a friend of Elvis? One thing to keep in mind, you could almost say that every major musician in music at the time, at some way, shape, or form, was a friend of Elvis. Because Elvis appreciated all good entertainers. He appreciated talent. And so Elvis really was friendly or friends with a lot, if not most, good entertainers at the time. You know, you've heard that he was friends with the Beatles, which is true. And then you heard there was a falling out, which is true to some extent. But it was never a falling out where the Beatles just don't like him anymore, because they still like him. They, you know, most of the Beatles that are alive, you know, Paul and Ringo, they still appreciate Elvis for what he was and who he was. And John before he died, and of course George did too. Elvis used to do crazy stuff when he was in Vegas. It's not the only time he did this. He had to be careful though. Just one thing that you need to understand about Vegas. Elvis played at the Hilton, originally the International Hotel. It was renamed the Hilton later on. And they had contracts. So Elvis couldn't just run up on stage with, say, Tom Jones and start singing at, say, the Sands, or get up on stage with, you know, Sinatra or Sammy Davis Jr. or any of the guys. He couldn't just jump on stage and start singing because it would cross contractual boundaries, and they couldn't do that. They weren't allowed to do that. So Elvis wasn't allowed to do that. But Elvis was a big prankster. So he did this to other people, but we were talking about Bill Medley. He actually, a couple times when Bill Medley was in a concert singing in Vegas, Elvis was at his show, and he was watching him. And he, just as a gag, jumped up on stage and ran across the stage and made a scene, you know, and, you know, of course, Bill started laughing and everything. And then Elvis just walked off the stage. And then later on, the next day, the next show, he did it again. And this is the kind of stuff he would do, you know. Elvis would do this. He would sometimes just jump up on stage and get in front of people. He couldn't sing. He was often asked to sing, but he couldn't because, you know, he wanted to, because he wasn't about the money. He didn't care. But he couldn't because of the contracts. But yeah, he was a total card, so to speak. Loved to prank people and do crazy stuff, and which is why later on, like I said, everybody in music, you know, all the major acts, the Sinatras and the Sammy Davises, the Rat Pack, the group out there at the time, you know, all the major players out there. If you don't notice, you know, he was pretty much friends with Tom Jones. There's you know, all kinds of songs out there to honor Elvis. Well, he didn't like Robert Goulet too much. Did not like Robert Goulet, and he did not like Mel Torme. He couldn't stand Mel Torme. It wasn't personal. He just didn't like his music. Um, and Robert Goulet, he didn't like Robert Goulet because when Elvis was a little bit younger, Robert Goulet stole one of Elvis's girlfriends, and it pissed Elvis off. So he really despised Robert Goulet, to be honest with you. So he just that's the truth behind why I didn't like Robert Goulet, because I've been asked a couple times through the years, well, why didn't he like Robert Goulet? And because you really don't see it written anywhere, or Robert Goulet. I mean, it's like his music ain't that bad, Why would he shoot TVs every time Robert Goulet came on? And he would. If he was watching TV and you're sitting in the room with him and Robert Goulet is sitting there, starts singing, bam, TV's gone, man. It's gone. Shot it. Every time. He'd blow the TV away. Couldn't stand Robert Goulet. That's what's funny, because one of my favorite movies is Scrooged, which came out obviously years after Elvis passed away. Had Elvis been alive, though, and had watched that movie, I can guarantee you he would have blown the screen out, because Robert Goulet was in that movie. He was singing on a boat. But anyways, there's a reference, you've seen a reference today to Elvis on SpongeBob. You know what? I challenge anybody, I've said it before to people in my family, people close to me, people in this room, I've said it before. I challenge anybody to go through a day, and I don't mean, obviously, all the people that come in my room or come on the Pal Talk, you're going to hear about Elvis, okay? But I'm saying, without that involved, I'm just saying, live your life tomorrow. Just go through your daily life, get in your car, drive, go to your job, go see your kids, do whatever you do. I will guarantee you, you will not be able to get through the day without seeing a picture of, a reference of, a song, or someone say something about Elvis Presley. It just won't happen. And I will tell you, there's not too many people, and I doubt there's any people, in my opinion, that'll happen for. Let's see here. Hold on. Okay. Lilo and Stitch, the creator of Lilo and Stitch loved Elvis, just so you know. The boys didn't let Elvis watch Streets of San Francisco. That's true. Mike Stone, you couldn't stand Mike Stone. We all know why. Couldn't stand him. But that's a whole nother story. But that had nothing to do with music. It had nothing to do with music. That had something to do with messing with someone. And but as you know, back to Bill Medley, he did write this song later on, "Old Friend," which was played in the room, because he really did. Elvis was his friend. So that, to answer your question, 100%, he was his friend. Is it true that Elvis liked to pull people over? Elvis did a couple times pull people over in Memphis and give them warnings because he did have badges and stuff in different cities and stuff. And at one time, this is a true story, there was two guys outside fighting, and Elvis pulled up. They were out fighting, and Elvis got out, and here's two guys fighting, right? And Elvis gets out of his car, and he runs up to him, and he does this karate stance, like all of a sudden he's doing his black belt stance, and two guys look at him, and it just stopped. It stopped right then. They just stopped and looking at it. They got Elvis Presley doing a karate stance, and Elvis wore these, flamboyant clothes. Even in regular clothes, he had his collars up, and and he's doing this karate stance, and it just took him back. He's like, "Stop it, boys!" And it stopped. The fight was over. Who's going to fight when you got Elvis Presley doing a karate stance in front of you? You just don't see this every day. That's like going to Philadelphia and running up the steps of the museum, and there's Rocky Balboa at the top of the steps, and actually Stallone. But there's the man standing there. You just don't expect to see that, And here's two guys. They're all out throwing punches at each other, and Elvis gets out of his car, and he's doing a karate stance in front of them. What the hell are you gonna do, man? He smoked cigars from time to time. He really didn't like to smoke too much, though. You'll see pictures of him smoking a little bit, but it really wasn't something he did a lot. He wasn't a smoker. Yeah, he wasn't a drinker. I mean, not to say he never touched any liquor in his life. Uh, Elvis liked the liquor. I mean, he liked to drink. No, I'm kidding. He liked to, once in a great moon he'd have a drink, but he wasn't a drinker. So, if people tell you Elvis was an alcoholic or drunk, they're completely lying. If they say he was a smoker, they're completely lying. Elvis didn't drink or smoke, as a rule. So, I mean, for one, he didn't want to screw up his voice. Okay, if you're talking about a video, you mean a movie? Just so you know, in movies they don't use alcohol typically. All right, most of the time, almost all the time, they don't use alcohol because there's more takes. And if they take a drink and then they got to do a take, I mean, there's songs Elvis did where he did 57 or 80 takes of a song. I mean, so I'm not saying he did that in a movie, but there were movies where he did 10, 15 takes of a scene. Yeah, Scatter was a drinker. He loved bourbon, um, and he used to get drunk. It wasn't a big surprise that Scatter ended up getting liver damage, unfortunately. It made him a little bit angry, and he had to be put outside, and eventually he passed away. But he got a little violent, and I don't know if you realize this, but chimpanzees are pretty strong, and you don't want a violent chimpanzee running around ripping people's face off. So as much as Elvis loved Scatter, he had, the years of abuse of drinking. Yeah, he was his chimp. It was a, chimpanzee. Um, and Elvis loved to have him around. I mean, he had him around in the early '60s, and yeah, that's exactly what he'd do. He'd get drunk and look up the women's skirts and dresses when they were there. Yeah, girls would laugh and giggle and stuff, but he knew what he was doing. Scatter loved the monkey paw, man. I'll tell you for sure. Oh man, I'll tell you, they're gonna take me away. I'm telling you for sure. Okay, what is this stuff going around that he was in Home Alone? Nah, he wasn't in Home Alone. That's just a guy that looked like him. There's all kinds of stuff like that on the internet. He wasn't in Home Alone. Yeah, Elvis. Just so you know, Elvis was probably actually, legitimately, about 5'11". He, yeah, I mean, he liked, yeah, he liked Pepsi, and he liked Gatorade when he was in concert. And he liked, he drank, he drank bottled water and Gatorade in concert, and he did like Pepsi. Now it's weird in the last concert that you see televised, you'll see Elvis drinking Coca-Cola out of a Coca-Cola glass, but that doesn't mean it was Coca-Cola. Okay, you know, they just, there's commercials and stuff, and you have to. Yeah, he also liked Old Spice, Brute, Colgate toothpaste is true. Yeah, Brute. The only thing he ever endorsed was when he was on the Louisiana Hayride. They got paid it was like $15 to endorse a donut shop. He endorsed a donut. Well, what it was is they were supposed to speak the jingle. They were supposed to speak something, and Elvis sang the jingle in the with the medley of "Don't Be Cruel." He did "Don't Be Cruel" and he sang their jingle. Somewhere out there, if you could find it, I haven't heard it in a long, long time. I don't even know if it's still out there. But there is the jingle that he did. He did it with the backing of "Don't Be Cruel" in the background. It wasn't played. I mean, he was singing it like he was singing the song using that tempo of the song, is what I'm saying. His favorite movie? Well, there's different reasons he liked different movies. I think he liked Love Me Tender because he liked the girl in it, uh, Deborah Paget. He was infatuated with Deborah Paget. Um, Charo he liked because he got to act without speaking, or without singing, without singing. He didn't have to sing it all in the movie. They finally got to do a movie where he didn't have to sing. He liked Blue Hawaii for certain reasons. I think you all know why I like Blue Hawaii. because it was in Hawaii. And he liked Viva Las Vegas, and we all know why I like Viva Las Vegas. And I'm not even going to answer that one, because if you guys don't know that, you look it up. Viva Las Vegas was obviously for a reason. I'm going to give a little bit of, there you go, Lil. You didn't even have to ask. I didn't even have to ask you. You knew Anne Margaret. Yeah, Anne Margaret. That's why I like that movie. You know, a lot of the early movies, just like, you know, King Creole. King Creole, you like King Creole a lot because James Dean originally was cast to do that movie. And of course, James Dean passed away, but James Dean was like Elvis's idol. You know, he loved James Dean. He used to sit there and watch James Dean movies, and he would just do every line in the movie, every single line. Sit there and watch it, just speak every line. He knew every line to every movie James Dean did. And so when he had the chance to do it, you know, he loved the fact that he could do the movie. I mean, it broke his heart that James Dean was gone. You know, but that's what the St. Jude's. Since you put that in the room, Danny Thomas founded St. Jude's. Of course, Margot Thomas. I believe Margot Thomas is now helping run it. It's in Memphis, and it's a hospital for people, you know, kids with cancer. And Elvis donated one of the biggest donations every year to that, St. Jude's. Love St. Jude's. Definitely a main backer of it, and to this day, Elvis's estate still gives to 20 or 30 different charities each and every year, and they have continued to do that from the time Elvis was alive until now. Presley Place is that's Lisa Marie's baby, so to speak. That's what she does, that to help the people, you know, who are displaced or need a place to live temporarily until they can get on their feet. Elvis actually did meet Jimmy Carter. He met, obviously, everybody knows he met Nixon. But he also met Jimmy Carter, which brings me to the reason why I don't really like talking about politics in the room, because, like I always have said in this room was made to mirror what Elvis would want. Okay? I in each and every way, I have tried to mirror this room to be what Elvis would have wanted. And Elvis did not like talking about politics. It's not to say he wasn't political around the boys, but what he didn't want to do in public was talk about politics. Because his opinion was, I'm just an entertainer, and really my opinion shouldn't matter. I'm just here to entertain the people and make them happy. And he was smart enough to realize that 50% of the people aren't going to be happy if you're a Democrat, and 50% of the people aren't going to be happy if you're a Republican. So his political views would have alienated half his fans had he let people know what his beliefs were politically as far as presidents. And he really didn't try to like one over another. Like I said, he went and met Nixon. He respected Nixon. Nixon's a Republican. He met Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter was a Democrat. He didn't let the political get in the way of it. Elvis respected his elders. He was brought up to respect people. And if you were the president of the United States, you were a very, very important man, obviously. And Elvis treated you as such. And he was in awe of the office. So he gave you the respect you deserve. Didn't matter who you were. As long as you were the president, he respected you. Didn't matter if you were Democrat, Republican, or alien. It didn't matter. He respected you. Hold on. Why wasn't Elvis given a military burial? That would have been awesome. I don't really think Elvis wanted to be buried in a military burial due to the fact that Elvis never really wanted to upstage anybody. You know, think about it. All those great people who died for their country. And, you know, here you are in Washington, D.C., and you're sitting there and you're looking at all this, you know, you're in the cemetery. And you're looking around. I mean, all it's going to become is like a mecca for all the Elvis fans are going to be just right over there. And is that really right? Elvis wouldn't have wanted that. He didn't want that. You know, his house is open to the public, and people can view his burial, his site where he's buried, and they can see it and they can give it the respect it deserves. But if it's out there, and he doesn't want it to become a place that people, 10,000 people show up and everybody else is ignored in the cemetery. I mean, it's just not his style. So, to answer your question, Elvis really didn't want to make himself the center of attention, even in death. Yeah, I mean, but that's why. Why did George Klein publicly say on radio during an interview, dating Donna Douglas? I won't say what else is on here, but because she passed away, and I don't like speaking to the dead in any bad light, if possible. I have the utmost respect for George Klein. He has said a couple things in recent time that isn't necessarily 100% true, and I'll leave it at that. But I have the utmost respect for George Klein, and I will tell you that George Klein is probably the most informed Elvis person out there that you could speak to. But as we get older and our memories get more lapsed, I mean, George has known Elvis from the time he was 13 years old. That's the 8th grade. So we're going on, geez, oh misery. Well, what are we going on here? 60, 67, 65, 66 years or something like that he knew him? It's a long time. A lot of things get cloudy and not always true. But most everything you're going to hear him say is going to be true. Did they ever save any DNA from Elvis? Most everything that the autopsy, almost everything, the bodily fluids and all that stuff is gone. I don't know where it is. Nobody does. Yeah, that autopsy report was very small, very, informal. I mean, it was informal. It wasn't a normal autopsy report. And most everything, I mean, is gone. It's not around. I mean, you got DNA, you got hair samples. I mean, Elvis gave people, there's hair samples out there and stuff. But as far as his autopsy report DNA, that's not where they got any of the DNA from. It didn't come from the autopsy stuff. Dr. Nick was in the ambulance with him. He jumped in the ambulance at Graceland and rode to the hospital with him. But at the time he was in the ambulance, Elvis had long since passed. Elvis passed away hours before he got to the hospital. Now that didn't stop the nurses and the doctors from jumping on his chest and trying to resuscitate him and, do everything they could, but Elvis had long since passed. When they found Elvis, he was gone. I mean, the first person, obviously, to find him was Ginger Alden, and then Al Strada, his bodyguard, and Joe Esposito came up, and Lisa Marie tried to see her dad at the time, and they had to take her out of the room, the bathroom area. There was 2 entrances to the bathroom, the front side with the bedroom and the back side. And they tried to keep her away, which they did, but she still knew something was going on. But, I don't want to go down this road. Let's keep it positive. But, because, like I said, one day I'll talk more about that stuff, the day of, the morning of, whatever you want to call it. But all I want to say is I don't want people thinking that Elvis was still alive and he was in the ambulance and, he was breathing and all this and, somewhere between Graceland and, Baptist Memorial he passed away. That's not true. He had passed at Graceland. All right, guys. I'm going to close her out tonight. That's going to be it for me. Like I said, I have no problem sitting in this room sometimes and just guys having you rattle off questions. Obviously, I can rattle them right back, the answers right back to you, okay? And I know when you were talking about somebody else that's on Pal Talk that claims he's Elvis or whatever he claims, whatever that goof claims, he can't do that. And there's a reason he can't, because he doesn't know what he's talking about. And that's all I'm going to say about that. But you guys are more than welcome to ask me questions anytime. I'm probably going to know the answers almost every time. There's not really a whole lot I really don't know, at least that I'm aware of. Lisa Marie and Priscilla and George Klein, I would say obviously are your experts out there that know more than anybody. But if you're on Pal Talk, or you're on YouTube or you see me somewhere, I mean, you can ask me. I'm probably going to know the answer just as good as anybody else out there. I love Elvis for his legacy, his great music, entertainment, generosity, and those he encountered. Yep, there is no better person, and I'll say this before I close out. There was no better person than Elvis, okay? We all love Elvis for his music. There's no doubt about it. I mean, we all love Elvis for his music. But I've said this before, and I'll say it again. The best thing about Elvis Presley was him as a person, was his generosity and how he encountered people, how he treated people, how he respected people, and how he would give the shirt off his back when he was poor and when he was wealthy. He'd give the shirt off his back to help a total stranger. That's what made Elvis the greatest person he was. That's what made Elvis great. It wasn't just his music. It wasn't the fact that he was religious or that he just the king of rock and roll. All that's great. That's great for posters. That's great for selling records. That's great for, that part of the legacy. But what was great about Elvis was him as a person. That's it. In a whole nutshell right there. Elvis is a person. There was no, I mean, don't get me wrong. No one's perfect. There's only been one person that walked the planet that was perfect. Okay? And Elvis would be the first person to tell you he's not the king. And he wasn't perfect. And he had a temper. And Elvis, there's a lot of stories out there, and Elvis did have a temper, and he wasn't perfect, and he did make mistakes. But I will tell you, no person tried to make up for those mistakes more than Elvis Presley, and no person would do more for you than Elvis Presley. And I mean, there are stories after stories after stories, and a lot of which I know are true. Almost everything you hear is probably close to being true, if not true, about his generosity. I mean, the last story I'll say is there was a radio DJ that was doing a story about Elvis's generosity late in Elvis's life, somewhere around 76, I believe. And he was doing a story about Elvis Presley. And he was doing a story on Elvis's generosity and how Elvis would give people Cadillacs. And he made a joke on air. He said, "Man, I'd love to get a car. Man, that'd be great." And just joking. He meant nothing by it. Next thing you know, the next day or so, the guy goes outside and there's a car sitting there for him. Elvis bought him the car. The radio, the TV guy just bought him a car. Just out of the blue. Sent him a car, Red. Bought him a car. I mean, it was nothing for Elvis to do that kind of stuff. And Little Bit Angel likes the story I tell sometimes of there's this black lady was sitting outside of this car lot. It's a true story. And Elvis he was picking up one of his Cadillacs they had ordered. And I mean, it had been, you got to understand now, Elvis didn't just buy a Cadillac off the floor. I mean, sometimes he would if he's buying it for people, but I mean, most of the time he'd buy it. He'd go in earlier and specifically pick out which kind he wanted, what he wanted on it, how it wanted it to be. And this was a specialized car he was waiting for. Yeah, decked out. And the lady's like looking over at him and goes, "Man, them are some pretty cars." He goes, "You like the pretty?" "I'm not. Nice cars. Boy, I wish one day I could afford a car like that. That would be the day I could afford a car like that." And Elvis Presley, he just got his keys to the car that he had waited to get. He handed it and said, "Honey, this is your lucky day. This is your car. Go inside. It's your car, honey." And he waited to get a different car. He gave her his specialized car, and he waited to get a different car. I mean, that's just the way he was. And an extension of this story. Now, most people sit here and they'll say, Yeah, but you know what? Elvis Presley. I mean, God, if I had that kind of money back then, Elvis could have bought anything. He could have owned Memphis. He was the king of Memphis. He was the king of the world. He had more money and he could do all that. Boy, if I had that kind of money, that's no big deal. Who cares? I mean, the guy was rich. He could. So what? He bought a Cadillac for somebody. Well, let me tell you something. We all know that Elvis grew up in Tupelo, Mississippi, in what's called a shotgun shack. And a shotgun shack is a little house that you can shoot a gun through the front door and it'll go right out the back door because it's a one-room house. It's nothing special. And the house that he grew up in was built by Vernon and Vernon's grandfather and another family member with borrowed money. And that's the house he grew up in. And Elvis was broke. I mean, we all know that. You have heard all the stories. Elvis, I mean, his family, I mean, had nothing. Here Elvis was, you know, he'd wait for his birthday or his Christmas to get a gift from Gladys, his mom, and Vernon, his dad. And they'd save and save and save to get you know, Elvis the nicest gift they could. And Elvis would be sitting out there playing with his toys. And now, like I said, let's keep in mind now, Elvis is broke. His mom and dad, you know, as he'd say, my mama and my daddy, I mean, even when he was older, he called her mama, and then when he was older, he called his dad daddy. He'd have a toy, you know, a truck, car, you know, a little thing he'd play in the dirt. And the little kids in the neighborhood, you know, because Elvis was friendly, they'd be looking at it going, wow, you know, because Gladys would save up and try and get him the nicest stuff she could. And he was playing with the little truck, and this happened more than once, because Gladys actually had to get on him a couple times, because Elvis would come running home and say, Mama, Mama, I made, you know, whatever the little kid's name was, you know, I made him really happy. What do you mean, Elvis? Well, he liked my truck. We like your truck. Where's your truck, Elvis? I gave it to him, Mama. Made him happy. You know, he gave the kids his toys. He'd give his toys away. Here's a kid who had nothing, and he was giving his toys away. So it has nothing to do. Elvis's money had nothing to do with his generosity. Elvis was generous when he was broke. Elvis was generous when he was rich. It was just his nature. Like I said, that was the person he was. Yes, he wanted everybody to be happy. And what's crazy is, here we think of Elvis, the king of rock and roll, the greatest entertainer of all time. I say it every night. Elvis is king of rock and roll, the greatest entertainer that ever lived, the one and the only, Elvis Presley, you know. Do you realize that every single time Elvis got ready to get on stage, almost every single time he had stage fright? He was petrified. He would sit in the back. He would stand there and right before he goes out, and he had to try and psych himself up because he was nervous. He was so scared to go up on stage because he didn't want to make the people unhappy, didn't want to screw up. He wanted to make sure that they liked him and they loved him and all that. Every single time, he was like afraid to go up on stage. And before the 1968 comeback special, Elvis actually had to be talked into going out there because he literally was ready to say, I can't do it. I can't do it. What if I bomb? What if I can't do it? What if they don't like me? And he got out there because they literally had to talk him into going out there. And thank God they did. I mean, yeah, exactly. Steve. That's the exact person who talked him into going up there on stage. Steve, the guy who was in charge of the show. And he said, man, Elvis, if you go out there on stage, you know, you used to be the king of rock and roll. You remember being the king of rock and roll. You go out on stage, and you will be, again, the king of rock and roll. And he was. He went out on stage and just knocked their socks off. I mean, I don't know if anybody hasn't seen that show. I don't know if it's possible you haven't seen that show. But if you haven't, watch it. Because that show is just raw Elvis at his best. Yeah, true story there, too. I believe it was out on the Hollywood Strip, if I'm not mistaken. Steve made a bet with Elvis backstage before he was filming. He said, Elvis, I bet you I could go out on Hollywood Boulevard, I believe is where it was, and nobody will notice you. course, you know, he had to wear regular street clothes. He couldn't wear big collars and stuff. I mean, he had regular street clothes. Um, but yeah, he went out on the Hollywood Boulevard, and nobody even noticed him. Didn't know who he was. And that's when Elvis knew that it was time to it was time to get back in the public eye, you know. Of course, he had to make a couple more movies because he had to finish out his contract. But soon thereafter, he had got the deal to go to Vegas and do the Vegas shows. Not technically what Elvis was looking at doing, because actually what Elvis wanted to do was more live concerts across the U.S., like he ended up doing at times during the Vegas years, but that's more like what Elvis wanted to do. But Vegas actually did turn into, in a crazy way, a rebirth of Elvis Presley. You know, and me personally, that's the Elvis Presley that I appreciate and love the most, is the older Elvis, the Elvis in his 30s, late 30s and 40s. His music, in my opinion, his voice got better, and his stage presence got better. His whole thing got better. His whole show got better. You know, his presentation, he was just at his best. But yeah, guys, I said a couple times I'm going to close her out, so I'm going to do that. But thank you for asking the questions. I appreciate it. I'm glad you did. And we appreciate you being here. And we love the fact that you come in each and every night and honor Elvis Presley. No problem, John. We appreciate you asking. Do come back. Make the room part of your favorites. Become a member of the room. We do have a YouTube page that's a room page that's out there. If you go on YouTube, it's mostly songs that or things like I'm doing right now. Everything in this room when I talk is recorded. So what you're hearing right now will end up being recorded and be put on a YouTube video. I don't know. Maybe Lil can put it in the room before I close. Yeah, there's a thing I did called The History of Elvis. That's pretty good if you want to listen to that. It talks about Graceland and, you know, Elvis and different urban legends and stuff like that. But if you can put that in the room before I close, I'll wait and then I'll close. I'm going to take it. There you go. Just copy that down. When you've copied it down, just let me know, and then we'll close out the room. All right. Okay, guys, with that, we're going to close out the room. I'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you that was here tonight. We had a great room, lots of great people, lots of great questions. I appreciate the interest in Elvis. I appreciate you guys honoring Elvis. I appreciate you being here each and every night. As you know, this room is about Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, the greatest entertainer that ever lived, the one and the only. With that, we're going to close her out, but as you know, we will be back tomorrow night. Same time, same place. Good night, everybody.